Good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca Kiefer. I do special projects with the city of Chamblee and am managing the project from the city side. And I have here with me Craig Lewis, who's the principal of Stantec and their Urban Places studio up in Charlotte. Also on the team, there's Joel Mann, who with Stantec, the Atlanta office, and I've got Matt Dickinson, who's the planning and Development Director, and Catherine Lee, who's the Community and Economic Development Director with the city, with us today, and Ellen Denham-Jones, who is our research partner, and we also have Zach Lancaster is our PhD student who's working on the project. So with that, I'll have Craig talk about kind of our phase one project that led us up to being ready for applying for the grant, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail about what our scope of work for the project is. And just in general, it's we're looking at implementing an autonomous shuttle and going into the next stages of that for the city of Chamblee.
Okay. All right, we had two competing presentations, and this one won, I guess. So apologize for any confusion. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background about what a self-driving shuttle is. So everyone has probably heard about autonomous vehicles. It's the shiny penny. We've been talking about it for about a year or so. There's billions of dollars that are going into this technology to help improve safety and sell you ad space. All at the same time. So that's why Google is investing all this money into it. We're particularly interested on our side, Stantec is, because we're interested in helping communities leverage the value that they have and try to improve mobility for everyone. Now, if everyone just moves from a car to a driverless car, we're not doing a darn thing for ourselves. But if we learn how to share our mobility a little bit better, a little bit more, then we start to improve options for our community. So that's why we're particularly interested on our side, because our focus is very much on urban places and how we maximize the value, which is in walkability when it all comes down to it in these communities. So we partnered with the city of Chamblee. Our company actually self-funded a grant to study this in 4 different communities across North America to look at this. So what is a self-driving shuttle? Well, there are a number of different manufacturers that are out there today. They're essentially sort of like the airport shuttle size, 8, 10, 12, 16 passenger vehicles. These are low-speed vehicles. The way I like to describe it is it's a bus without a driver and a streetcar without the cost. No offense to anyone affiliated with the streetcar, but they're expensive. We're trying to figure out how we deliver mobility with much greater value. That's the biggest challenge that we have these days. We just can't build another MARTA because it's so insanely expensive. So how can we use these investments to improve mobility for everyone at all ends of the spectrum, and particularly ones that are most transit dependent? I think that's most important. So these are sort of the vehicles that are out in the wild. They are fully autonomous. They operate independently of sensor technology. They have all of this. They have redundant sensors built into the vehicle. They're intended to operate in low speed, low volume environments, at least initially, right now. And they have wonderful little bells that go along with them. Interestingly, there are, as part of this, the manufacturers are not only revolutionizing the mobility itself, but the production of the mobility. One of the manufacturers is actually 3D printing these vehicles. And so they're sort of revolutionizing how we're delivering manufacturing, period, and how we're doing this. So everyone's concerned about Amazon. Don't worry about it. Get a 3D printer. It'll put Amazon out of business in a few years. But we'll be doing the same thing with mobility. These vehicles have been in operation for a number of years across the world. A lot of stuff in operation in Europe. There's been one in operation in Las Vegas that's operating both in mixed traffic and a dedicated lane. That's out there. And so for the city of Chamblee, we took a look at where this type of technology might be deployed. We looked specifically at the downtown area because they have a wonderful MARTA station and a downtown that they really would like to see more investment in over time. And it's just a really sort of burgeoning opportunity. A lot of really great chef-driven restaurants and local retail that's starting to inhabit their downtown. And it's about 3/4 of a mile, a little bit longer, from the MARTA station. So on a nice hot muggy day like today, it's not as motivating to walk. So how can we shorten that distance? That's all part of that. Chamblee has high transit ridership today, and they have some great demographics that feed into transit ridership in general overall. And I think that that's going to play into the success of this kind of technology or other portions of technology that we want to take a look at. We evaluated a number of different routing options that are out there. There are a lot of things that this type of technology that will be good for in a few years, 5, 10 years, as it gets more experience under its belt, as the AI takes over. But right now, they can only really operate in certain types of environments. So the initial feasibility stage looked at a couple different routings. We evaluated all those both on quantified and qualified data, what things are really important for the city as we kind of move that forward. And so I identified a preferred routing that goes both from past the MARTA station, south on Peachtree Road, all the way north, and actually connects up into the city of Doraville. And there's a large redevelopment project that's going on there called the Assembly site, Assembly Yards, that we hope to connect those two elements to and have about 1.25 miles routing through that area. And there's potential expansions over time as everything gets successful. Just some kind of quick images of what they look like as they're operating out in the wild. And I think the thing is that there's not a lot of physical improvements that are necessary, but there's some things that we can do to highlight the opportunity. So we want to take advantage of the fact that we're running some new ability to also do some things that accentuate the walkability of the overall corridor. I think that's going to be really important, and just sort of understand that it's a gateway opportunity for the community. So from an implementation side, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, there's costs associated with running transit. We want to try to minimize that cost and open up mobility to a greater portion of the population. So our first step was to take a look at the feasibility, identified the concept plan for how this might work. We identified some preliminary costing for that. The next step, we'll be looking at the sort of operational elements of that and how it would actually be deployed as part of that. We're also working with the next developer over to deploy a shuttle on the Assembly Yard site. And so we're all three two communities, developer and Stantec, are all working together in partnership to get that underway. And so we're very excited about that as an opportunity. And just a kind of a couple of things, what do we know about it right now? This is all new stuff. There are a lot of great promises about autonomous vehicles. A lot of testing has been done on North Avenue, as mentioned earlier. But even so, the sensors that went into North Avenue 6 months ago are already out of date because the technology is changing so fast. So we understand how this kind of technology can go in and not be functionally obsolete in 4 or 5 or 6 years or even less. And so how we can adapt it and how we can leverage it, and how the city can leverage it to minimize the construction of parking, which is real dollars, and enhance development value over time. So a lot of things we don't know about it, and we want to continue to study that, and that's part of our research and looking what are those unknowns about this technology and how can we fill in those blanks. So,
All right.
I don't remember what's after that.
Oh, and I can go back to this. So to briefly explain what our project proposal was for the Smart Communities Challenge, first we had, in critically thinking about who we wanted to partner with on this, first we identified City of Doraville as a critical partner. They are, touching and house some of the developments that we're seeking to provide some of the ridership for the pilot study there along Peachtree Road. And so we wanted to incorporate them as a partner. Stantec, of course, as our consultant for the Phase 1 process, working with the Assembly Yards project, and then also working with us on this project. Assembly CID as that arm of assembly yards focused on transportation and transportation improvements. And then also, as Craig had mentioned, they're also looking at implementing their own autonomous shuttle solely on their site. So we saw some synergies there with being able to learn from some of the shuttles and things that they were trying to select for their own site. So they're an important partner. As well as MARTA as a transit agency, and of course being able to provide last mile connectivity for the MARTA station along our route, and then CPL, the organization I work for, and being able to provide kind of back office support, architecture, engineering, and planning as a part of that. So those were the partners we had selected, and the scope of work was largely based on the phase 1 study, where we had done the feasibility study and the concept plan and had identified that initial route. And so the study was able to provide the backbone for the scope of work for our what we're calling our phase 2 portion of the project. And we proposed 2 different components to our scope of work. The first being what would actually get us, implementation, the shuttle on the ground. And so that entails a system operations plan that a consultant will, Stantec will help us answer certain questions like what's the precise alignment, how many vehicles are we going to need, and things like that. And then some preliminary concept engineering for that, actually being able to implement the shuttle and get it on the street. And then the research side of that Ellen's going to pick up on, and that entailed a best practices manual. And so the components of that were user preferences, looking at the study of mode choice, commuter patterns, parking ratios, how are those changing with the autonomous vehicle, user interface, how do people interface with this technology, and how do we make it an experience that's not just based on the novelty of this futuristic technology. How can we really work with it and experience it? And then retrofitting, parking lots and parking decks are going to change with the onset of this technology. The human scale is probably going to be taken out of it. So how do we plan for that? And then just with Ellen's, general work and land use, with this new technology, there's potential for a lot of pitfalls, and can we combat the potential sprawl and things that could arise from this, or at least anticipate it and learn how to plan from it a little bit better than we have in the past. There's that, and then also a funding model component, because some of state and local revenues could change in the future as a result of this technology. Are there traffic violation fines that we don't have as revenue anymore, parking and things of that nature. So wanting to look at alternative revenue models as a function of this project. So with that, I think if I left you with anything as far as assembling the application, we probably had, if I had to opine about the success of our application, I think there are 3 primary elements of our application. One, we had a city council and city leadership that's really passionate about getting this off the ground. If any of you have ever talked with Mayor Clarkson, he's got a passion for this, and you probably had a conversation with him about autonomous vehicles. Also, this application I think was really ripe based on where we were in the process. We had done some work before, had put out, expended some money, and had some concepts, and had some work to do to get to this point, and then there's some work to do after we're done with this grant. So we were really at the right stage of the process. And then lastly, the best practices manual is not only something that served as a solution for how we were going to partner and do the research component, but it's also a document that we can take and kind of effectively grow the grant dollars, and to be able to work with other communities, share our experiences, and cities aren't typically innovators, and so this was our opportunity to be able to share everything and potentially provide a turnkey solution so that other communities could take what we've learned and implement it in their own communities.
Thank you so much.